Hello, this is Deborah Clay, fiction author and podcaster, and this is Castaway Books. Each week I ask an author to tell me about the books that have influenced their life and inspired their writing. This week's guest is Julie Haworth. Hello, Julie Haworth. I'm so delighted.
Hi, hello.
Delighted to welcome you to my island on this auspicious day, which is the day that your book, New Beginnings at the Cozy Cat Cafe, came out. So congratulations.
Yeah, it's publication day. I've got a copy here. Now I've actually got one. It's exciting to to see it. But yeah, so it's paperback publication day today.
Very exciting, really exciting. Congratulations. And I love the idea of a cozy cat cafe, because cat cafes, I saw one in Nottingham for the first time a few years ago. The cats all walking around the window and in between your feet.
Yeah.
Amazing, aren't they?
Yeah, I feel like they've got really popular. So when I first had the idea for the book, and probably when I first started writing it, it was probably about 2 years ago now. And I'd been to a cat cafe in London, and it was just, I literally had some time to kill before a meeting, and just like walked past it and was like, what is this? And kind of had a look in, and went in for a coffee. And I didn't know it was a thing. It was the first time I'd been to one, and I loved it. And I thought it was such a great idea. And that sort of seeded the idea, really, that I thought, oh, I'm sure that I could do a book set in a cat cafe. That would be lovely. And then since then, actually, there's quite a few now. And there's a few in Essex now, which there weren't at the time. So they've really sort of grown in popularity, I think.
Exciting. And it's your second book, because your first book, which was Always by
Your Side. Yeah.
It actually won the Romantic Novelists Association debut that year, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I know. So that was really exciting. So I feel like book two's got a lot to live up to. Because obviously book one was really successful and winning the RNA award. So yeah, I was really just blown away with how everyone reacted to it and how much people loved it. So it was kind of better than I ever could have hoped, I think.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. It's really exciting.
Thank you.
And
It was.
honoured to have you here today. So let's go straight in to your first book. And I have to say, before we go through your books, all of your books are ones that I would have had on my list too. So
Oh wow! Oh, great minds think alike.
Your first book.
So my first book was going back to when I was studying English literature at A-level, and it was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And that was the first book. I just feel like that was a real game-changing book for me. That was the book that made me decide to want to go and do English lit at university. I just loved it. I'd never read anything like it before. I think it's quite, even though I guess it is a classic and it is a romance, it's quite it's not your typical romance. It's quite different. Obviously you've got Heathcliff as the anti-hero. It's quite dark in places, and I just had never read anything like it before. And I think sort of studying it with a critical eye, like you do at A-level, I felt like it unlocked something that I just remember thinking, wow, I've never looked at a book in this way before, and it got me used to thinking about things critically and what the author's intentions were and like the different themes. And there's just so much to unpick in that book.
I absolutely loved it too. And I first, before I read the book, I think I saw the black and white film version. And I loved that.
Yeah.
The Brooding Heathcliff. Was it Laurence Olivier who played him?
There's been so many versions, hasn't there? I'm sure that I remember our English teacher like wheeling in a TV back in the 90s, where they used to go and get the TV so that you could watch the movie version. But I think I've probably seen all the movie versions, because there's been quite a few, hasn't there?
And there were books that came after. Well, in the actual book, it went on to other generations, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And I think, I mean, I've still got the actual copy that I had for my A-level exams, like with all my highlighted sections and like pencil notes in the margin. And it just, and I just absolutely loved it. And I think obviously going on to study university and doing English Lit, obviously I read, you know, sort of Jane Eyre's and the other Bronte novels and all sorts, but that's always been my favourite. And I don't know if that's because it's the first book that really sort of ignited that sort of passion to want to go and study English, but it's just all, I think it's just got a really special place in my heart. And I do sometimes think, oh, if we hadn't studied that book because other classes were studying different texts, you know, if we'd done, I don't know, Pride and Prejudice or something different, like would I have had the same response? Would it have led me down the same path? I don't know.
Mm.
I
That's
hope
my
so, but I
favourite
don't
one
know.
too. It's my
It's
favourite.
my favourite. And it's just like the Moors, I feel like the Moors are almost like a character in themselves, aren't
Yeah,
they? It's so
yeah.
kind of like that wild kind of nature. And also, obviously, my surname's Haworth, so I've visited Haworth and been to sort of see where the books were written. So I don't know if that, I don't know. I don't know if that connects me to them a bit more. I don't know, but I just absolutely, I love everything by the Brontes, but Emily's definitely my favourite.
Mm. So where were you brought up? You,
So Essex, yeah. So I was born in Essex, and I've always lived in Essex. I went to Canterbury to do my English degree. Lived in London for a while, but then came back to Essex. But so I don't. Yeah, I would quite like to trace back to see if there is any connection to Haworth,
mm,
because we don't have any relatives that come from. I don't know what if there is any connection at all. But it would be. I'd be quite intrigued to see if there was. Do a bit of kind of tracing of family trees and things.
yeah. I did my master's at the Kent University, which is in Canterbury.
Yeah, that's where I did my English degree. Yeah,
That's where we
I
had,
loved it there.
yeah, you probably like me were given your had your graduation at in the cathedral.
Yes,
I did.
yeah, so lucky because
I
it's just
know.
such an amazing building. So I do, yeah, really fortunate. I think when you see where, you know, some people sort of have, you know, doing graduations, you're not going to get a kind of grander backdrop, are you, than that? I don't think.
Fantastic.
That feels like a very long time ago. I think that was like 1997 or something. So barely remember it. It was a long time ago.
Had you always wanted to be a writer? When you were doing your English, could you, what were you imagining going
Yeah.
to work as when you did your degree?
So I didn't have a plan, I would say. I literally just chose to do English because I loved reading and I'd loved doing it was my favourite subject at A level, so it seemed the natural progression. And I think it's one of those degrees where you could potentially do most things with it. So it doesn't exclude you from doing anything. But I didn't really have a plan. Although I've loved reading, I'd never thought about writing or trying to be a writer. Um, I think it felt a bit like I might as well have said, "Oh, I'm going to try and be a rock star."
Mm.
It just
Yeah.
didn't feel like a possibility or something that was kind of achievable. So I had never really done any creative writing courses, never kind of looked into that because it just, I guess it seems such a long shot, doesn't it, to
Mm.
become a published author when you think how tricky that is. And it's so much work to produce a book on the hope that maybe one day something could happen. And so it just never happened until now.
Mm. It's perhaps easier than it was when we were younger, because when we were younger, very few people got published, whereas now there are so many
Yes.
ways you can get published that it's become,
Yes.
which is great because it means that people can express themselves, and writing is like any other creative art. So yeah,
Yes.
it's great that everybody feels that they can have a go at writing, but achieving
Yeah.
writing a novel is a huge achievement. Just a first draft is huge.
Yeah, I think, and I sort of kind of blindly went into it. I don't think I had any concept of how much work it was going to be, or you know, because it is. And so I think it was, you know, that was something that I probably wasn't prepared for. And like you say, typing the end is just such a huge achievement when you think how, you know, it's maybe 6, 8 months of your life longer than that. Sort of even getting to that point is such a huge achievement. Yes, a lot of work. Maybe it's a good thing I didn't know how much work before I gave it a go.
It's a joy as well, hopefully.
Yes, absolutely.
We're lucky. So book two.
So book two, I hope I've got the right one here, is Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding. And I've picked, I'm sure hopefully lots of people are aware of this book. Lots of people probably have seen the movie versions. And I just love this story. And I think I vividly remember reading it. I'd moved to London after university. Everyone I knew was reading this book. Everyone on the tube was reading this book. And I just remember travelling to and from work on the Central Line, and it just felt like the whole carriage was reading Bridget Jones's Diary. So obviously I had to find out what all the fuss was about. And it was one of the first books that I read after graduating. And I think when you do your degree, obviously your reading is very prescribed. You're following the reading list. You don't really have spare time to read for fun. You're kind of reading what you're told to read, to produce essays and dissertations and things like that. So it was one of the first books that I read that I felt like I'd actually chosen to read. And I was reading it for fun, and I was reading it for enjoyment. And obviously it was a very modern book, so it was really different from everything I've been reading for the last 3 years. And it's just hilarious. And it's just you would just see people shaking with laughter on the tube as they were reading it. And I think everyone can identify with Bridget. I mean, I think everyone's got a bit of Bridget in them, haven't they? Like some of the situations she gets herself into, and we love her because I think we can all relate to her, or I certainly can. And you even now, I think people would say, "Oh, that's so Bridget," and people would know what you were talking about. Even I've got my book launch party tomorrow night, and if I do a speech, my cousins have already said to me, like, "Oh, don't do Bridget Jones." Like everyone knows that moment and what that reference means. So I think it's, how many years later is it? Like 20 years later, and like we all still kind of like know the references and know exactly what we're talking about.
It's a classic for sure. And book or film? Because I was actually on Facebook, I was having this discussion about actually Bridget Jones's Diary this week.
Oh, okay.
We
Yeah.
refer on books and films of different things. Actually, Captain
Yeah.
Corelli's Mandarin came up, Bridget Jones' Diary,
Yeah.
all of them. We were saying, which do you prefer, book or film? And if you do one, do you avoid the other? So for you?
So for me, it's always book, because I think if you have read a book and you love the book, the film's always going to let you down a bit. I just think it is, because you've created the picture in your mind of who the characters are, the setting. And I just don't think the on-screen version will ever live up to that. And I'm that person that's always going, that doesn't happen in the book, or what about that bit? They haven't covered that. That's in the book. So I think it's always going to be condensed, isn't it? And I think that you can't fit a whole book into a 2-hour movie. And some of the bits I love kind of don't make the movie cut, and then that sort of ruins it for me. But I've still watched the movie. But I love the Bridget Jones movies, but I still prefer the books.
Yeah, I always read book first, and sometimes I do eventually watch the film or the
Yeah.
dramatization. Actually, some things I don't. I have to admit, I haven't read Virgin River series, although I love it on Netflix.
No, I haven't actually.
Or
Yeah, and I
Bridgerton.
love
Love
that.
Bridgerton, but I haven't read that.
Same. Yeah, that's true. So I do. Yeah, there are occasions where, yeah, exactly. Those two are really good examples for me, because I love Virgin River and Bridgerton, but I haven't read the books. But I think if I have read the book, I will see the film, but I just will be prepared that I probably won't love it as much as the book. So I kind of go into it with those expectations.
And you told me that Mad About the Boy is going to be a film, which I didn't know.
Did I tell you? Oh, I
Oh,
don't
maybe
remember
someone
that. I
else
don't know if
did.
that was me. I
Maybe
think that was
someone
someone
else.
else.
Maybe someone else
Oh,
did. Did
okay.
you know
Because
that?
I didn't know that. So that's new. That's news to me. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. I can't remember who told me then.
Oh, it wasn't me.
Excellent. So on to book 3, which I just mentioned actually.
Yeah, you did. So Captain Corelli's Mandolin,
Love, love,
which is
love that.
probably similar time to Bridget Jones, maybe slightly after Bridget Jones. And I think in a similar way, I was just getting my reading groove back out of being after uni, and kind of figuring out what I like to read. And it's quite strange, because I felt like I'd been sort of told what to read for 3 years, and it was quite freeing to be able to choose things and sort of work out actually what do I like to read. And again, it was a huge book, wasn't it? Everyone was reading it. It was super popular. And I think one of the things I love so much about that book is the setting.
Mm.
It just, it's such a magical setting, and it just the author just conjures it so well. And I feel like everyone I know was going to Kefalonia to sort of, based on reading the book. It was that kind of, had that much of an impact, that people were specifically saying, I want to go to Kefalonia because of the book. And that, so that was definitely. And I think obviously then the film came with Nicolas Cage. I didn't actually like the film. I don't know why I'm whispering. It wasn't one of my favorite films.
Nicholas isn't here or
No, sorry,
on my
Nicholas, but
island.
I wasn't a fan. And I think that was a classic of, he just wasn't who I imagined Captain Corelli to be. And it just, for me, felt like I just couldn't get on board with it, because I think you're so invested in the characters, and it's such an epic love story, kind of against all odds and against the backdrop of war. And yeah, I was like, it can't be Nicolas Cage. It's just, he's not Captain Corelli. It just doesn't work for me. So I did watch the film, but I didn't really enjoy that one. Whereas with Bridget Jones, I love the films.
I absolutely loved that book. It just was unput
I
down.
know.
Adored it.
Yeah, it is. It's just like you're so invested in the love story. You're rooting for them. There's so many hurdles in the way, and so many things against them, so many things going wrong, and things out of their control, obviously with the invasion. And so I think yeah, it's just beautiful, and it's just told in a beautiful way.
How does, when you're reading, especially as you've had an English literature training with your degree, how
Yeah.
does reading and studying that affect how you write? Does it intimidate you in writing, or does it stop you freeing up, or how do you take how do you apply that
Yeah.
when you're writing what you've learned?
I think, do you mean sort of like looking at things with a critical eye
Yeah.
and kind of, yeah. So I think I'm quite good at compartmentalizing, and not doing that if I'm reading for fun. So I think if I'm just enjoying a book, I'm just enjoying a book, and I'm not thinking, what does this mean? What was the author thinking? What are the themes? I'm just kind of enjoying the story. And I think it's hard, isn't it? I mean, I would say, like, when I'm writing my own stuff, my own fiction, that I don't really feel like that has much of an impact on it. I don't think kind of that I'm looking at things critically, or I don't know. I'm not much of a plotter, so I tend to sort of like figure the plot as I go along. So it's almost like I have to write to know what's going to happen next, rather than being able to sit and kind of plot it all out, which I know some people are really good at. So no, I would say I don't feel like it has much of an impact on my own writing, because I think I just lose myself in my story, and I kind of forget maybe all the technical stuff. And maybe that's not a good thing, because I feel like it should help me, but I think I just get lost in what I'm doing, and just enjoy it, and I just kind of forget about sort of like looking at like technical or critical aspects.
Well, it obviously does work because your books are very popular. So
Oh, I hope, and I think also maybe it helps that my degree was quite a long time ago now, so I've probably forgotten a lot of the stuff that I was taught and learned kind of like back in the 90s.
because I can see how that, or learning creative writing, can get in the way, because the part of your brain that just is
Yeah,
meditative, where the ideas flow, I think there's right and left
yeah,
side of your brain. It's a different side of the brain to the analytical side. And I should
yeah.
think that you could get in your own way if you overthought things.
Yeah, no, I think I'm quite able to step away from like the analytical side and just get lost in the story, and maybe a bit more in edits, in the, sort of doing structural edits and things like that. Maybe you're thinking a bit more critically then, but I think in that first draft, it's just flowing and you're just kind of lost in it.
Mm.
So I don't really feel like it hampers me, which hopefully is a good thing.
So, done your degree, which you say was a long, long while ago. You're on your tube reading. What was the job
Yeah.
you went into?
So I've had quite an interesting. I've done quite a lot of different things. So when I first left university, I was working for a PR firm, which I guess was writing, because we were writing press releases and things like that. I didn't do that for long, and then I did a PGCE to train as an English teacher. So I kind of look back now, and I don't really know how that happened, but somehow it did. I ended up as an English teacher. So in my early 20s, I was teaching English in a secondary school. I did that for a few years, and I think I just was very in your early 20s, I was kind of spending all my weekends marking A-level and GCSE coursework. All my friends were going out. I kind of was a bit disillusioned and thought, what, why am I not going out? And so I left teaching completely. And then I went to work for a news publishing agency. So again, like, was writing, but it was very business to business, technical stuff. So press releases about things like telecoms or finance. So it was writing, but there wasn't any kind of well, not really. I wouldn't say it was creative writing. It was very kind of technical and kind of news media-y, I suppose. And then after doing that for a few years, I then went back to teaching, but I was teaching primary and I did a specialist dyslexia qualification. So I was working with children with literacy difficulties and helping to identify those difficulties and support them in the classroom. And then I left teaching completely probably about 5 years ago.
Mm.
So
Excellent.
a lot of them, I would say they've all involved
Mm.
books, writing. There is a kind of a common thread, even though the jobs have all been quite different.
Yes, yes. And now you've
Yeah.
come home, now you're writing, and you're working as a full-time
Yes.
author now, just writing, are you?
No, so I'm not. So I've got my own copywriting business. So that involves kind of writing content for businesses, for social media, for website content, all of that kind of stuff like blogging. So I would say I'm sort of 50-50 split between book writing, fiction writing, and kind of paid client work and working on projects.
A nice mix, because you can work them around
Yeah.
each other. Mm.
Exactly. So that's working quite well at the moment. I think the ideal plan would be to be able to be a full-time fiction writer, but I'm not quite there yet. So I'm working towards that.
Excellent. So that takes us now on to book number 4.
So book number 4 is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. And I love this. I know I'm saying this for every book, but I love this book. It's probably very different from the other books that I've mentioned so far. It's quite a dark story, I would say. And obviously when we meet Eleanor, she's living quite I guess a small life,
Mm.
that she's just in her routine, doing the same thing every day. She's not she's not I don't know, actually. I was going to say she's not unhappy, but I think maybe she is. And it's just a twist of fate, a chance kind of meeting, an act of kindness, helping someone, and it sort of unlocks these new relationships, these whole new worlds, pushing herself out of her comfort zone. But her own backstory is tragic and sad, and there's a lot although it is kind of sad and heartbreaking, it's also an uplifting story as well, I think, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I found it overall to be really positive and really uplifting. But I think when you first start reading it, maybe you're not certain of that.
Mm. Mm. I loved it too. I think it just brings home to you how people you pass on the street, who sit on the tube or in the supermarket, you don't know what's going on in their lives. We all have
No.
carry stories. And I talk about, when I talk about books, I talk about emotional resilience and emotional courage. And it's not those huge acts of heroism, it's the everyday things that women in
Yeah.
particular deal with, coping with family life and the everyday
Yeah.
things that they have to wrestle with. And I think that book was really good in just showing somebody's vulnerabilities. Yes, it was tender, wasn't it?
It was. And I think just, sort of coming back from such a trauma to build a life for herself in the only way she knows how to. And then maybe starting to realize that she isn't really living, or she isn't really kind of experiencing the world in the way that she would want to. And like you say, it's just a chance sort of accident, encounter, call it what you will, that kind of brings these new people into her life. And it's that thing of, she works with people and they don't really know, her backstory, or what's going on for her. And we don't know that for anyone, do we? That we perhaps even, we work with, we know, are in our sort of circle, but we're not, you don't always know what people are dealing with and what's going on behind the scenes.
Now, you write uplifting books and you're about community and
Hmm.
friendship. Do you hope to inspire people going through difficulties? You had feedback that your books are doing that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the second book's not been out for long. So obviously, the blog tours happened and there's been some amazing reviews from people, and people are already saying, like, this was the book that I needed to kind of lift my spirits, and that's just so, like, it's so amazing to hear that, and the thought of someone enjoying it or it just brightening up their day. It's just, I still can't believe that I can do that and that's actually happening. It's just amazing. And I think they're the kind of stories that I really love. I think, the world is a difficult place. There's lots of things going on. Quite often, like, all the news we see is very negative, and there's so many pressures on our lives and our time. So I think being able to have a really sort of escapist, feel good, uplifting read can be really important, and should never be underestimated. The impact of a story like that, just to take you out of the day to day, just to give you some headspace to lose yourself in a book, and forget about what might be going on around you, what you're dealing with, like your day to day struggles. And I certainly, that's kind of one of my aims in writing the kind of books that I do, really, because I think that's what I like to read, and so if I can provide that to other readers, that's amazing.
It's a great privilege as an author to be able to touch someone's heart
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and I think I'm still, it really does touch you, I think, when someone says that the book has meant a lot to them, or it's helped them through a difficult time, or even just that they've enjoyed it.
Yeah,
It is just, it is, it's a pinch me moment every single time.
it's fantastic. Well done. So on to book number 5.
Book number 5, which was quite a recent read for me. So it's The Forgotten Village by Lorna Cook. So I only read this book quite recently. So this year, I've become quite a fan of audiobooks now. So I'm listening to a lot of audiobooks at the moment because I'm just finding they're great when you're on a walk or you're doing housework, or if my other half's watching football, I can just plug in my audiobook. And it's the first time, because I don't generally read much historical. So Lorna's book, excuse me. Oh, sorry.
Right.
I might have to let you speak for a minute. Sorry. I've
All
got a
right.
tickle.
Have some water by.
Oh dear. Um, sorry, Deborah.
All right. Just get some water. Okay.
No, I should be fine in a second. I think I've been talking too much today. That's probably the problem. So it's dual timeline, and I was equally as invested in both of the timelines. So it was just such a fantastic story, and it's actually made me read a lot more historical. So since I've read Lorna's book, I've actually read a couple of her others and some other historical fiction, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm a bit like, why have I not been reading historical all the time? Because it's great.
I'm writing a dual timeline at the moment, and because of that, I started reading dual timeline historical, which I'd always enjoyed, but even more so. But like you, I've discovered audiobooks because I get them from the
Yeah,
library, borrow books.
me too.
Yeah. And the one I'm really loving listening to at the moment, and now I'm even thinking I wished I got it as a paperback, is Kate Morton's Homecoming, which I'm really
Oh, okay.
enjoying, recommend. Very,
Okay. Oh,
very
I'll
good.
try that.
Mm.
Yeah, I've
And then
definitely heard of it, but I haven't read it yet.
Kate Morton. And the other day I was in the car, we got a new car, and I didn't know that the audio on the car picked up, without me even switching it on, my story from where
Oh.
I was,
Oh,
like some magic
amazing.
thing. So
Oh, wow.
I know. I did. It
Fantastic.
was on Bluetooth, and I just went audio on the thing, expecting to listen to the radio, and suddenly it was playing my
Oh, there was
story.
your book.
So that was a
Amazing.
discovery.
That would be, yeah, my car's definitely too old for that to for that to happen, but that would be amazing. Because I think, especially, I'm sure you can relate, like when you're on the computer all day, you're typing away, in the evenings, my eyes get quite tired now. And just I'm finding it really hard to kind of like sit reading in the evenings, and I felt like I wasn't getting as much reading time. And audiobooks has really changed that, because like I say, I'll just, I go on a walk most days so I can plug in there. And I'm just getting through so many books now, which is great, because I felt like I was in a bit of a reading slump before, because I was spending so much time writing that my reading was really falling behind. So that's been great. So Lorna was one of the first books that I read the audio of. Yeah, and I just loved it. It was great. And like I just loved how it was stuff they were finding out in the present day was like weaving into this story, and it was just, yeah, I couldn't wait. I couldn't figure out how it was all going to pan out, so it was
Mm.
really exciting.
Well, I ordered that book when I read your recommendations. I'm looking forward
Oh,
to
you will
reading
love
it.
it. It's absolutely brilliant. It was so good. And it's one of those books where, like, literally the first chapter ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. And I was instantly like, right, I need the next chapter. I need to keep going. And
Brilliant.
it's good with the dual timeline, because I think you get to those cliffhanger moments and then it might switch to the other point of view in the other timeline. And you're kind of like, I need to know what happens. But then you get invested in the new timeline. So it's great.
And I think it's a hard act to pull off. I was reading reviews on the Kate
Yeah.
Morton one, and somebody said they liked the fact that each period didn't end on a cliffhanger and keep swapping backwards and forwards. And
Okay.
I think it's a gift to know, or a writing skill when you're writing those, to know when you go from one to the other. Because you want to have a
Yes.
natural bit between
Yeah.
learning. That's why I'm listening and reading
Yeah.
all the
And
time.
it definitely did make me think, oh, like maybe I will have a go at because I've never even considered that. But I just think with historical, obviously the research,
Mm.
I don't know how historical authors, like, the research just seems like such a mammoth task. I find that quite scary to think of, because you're sort of doing that as well as writing a book almost. So it's like as if writing a book isn't enough of a huge task, I'm actually need to do all this research as well.
I love the research. The trouble is, I do much more research than I need. I've got pages and pages of it,
Oh.
and I can't remember where I wrote it or read it, and I have to do it all again, or I don't use it. But
Oh.
talking of audio books, the time I listen to them, because I have them on my Bluetooth headphones, is when I'm doing ironing and housework, things that I
Yes.
absolutely hate doing normally.
Yeah.
When I've got a good story
Yeah.
on, I'll clean the house within an inch of
Yeah.
my life because I don't want to leave the story.
My house has never been so clean as since since I've started cleaning to an audiobook, because you
Exactly.
literally don't want to, like, switch off, so you
No,
just keep
you're
going.
scrubbing and scrubbing,
Yeah. I
cleaning.
know. And you look so productive as well, don't you? Yeah. So it's no, I've got through so many books. I think I got the Borrow Books app back in April, and it's literally, I can't believe how many books I'm getting through. And they've got so many, everything I wanted, they've kind of had. And if they haven't, I've kind of bought the audio. But yeah, it's great. And I think also sometimes people don't realise that with PLR, that authors do get royalties every time you borrow their book from a library. So if you're using BorrowBox, obviously that's benefiting the author. And I don't think I knew that before I was an author. So you don't always have to buy the book. Like, using your library is brilliant as well. So I'll always, we've got a great library in Chelmsford, so I go in there loads.
Pray for libraries.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're getting to that bit now where I'm asking you about what is the luxury you'll take with you on the island?
This was an easy one for me, because there's pretty much one thing that I can't go a day without, and it is chocolate. I
Yay.
feel like it's probably quite an obvious one, but I love it. And it's just, yeah, I always will save, like, sort of 2 squares of chocolate, like it's an evening treat. And the thought, no matter how beautiful the desert island looks behind you, if there was no chocolate available, I would find life really tough. So I think that's definitely my weakness, and I would definitely be taking it with me.
Have you ever tried giving it up for Lent?
No, no. No, I've just never tried. So I think I've kind of got better as I've gotten older, and trying to sort of like limit sugar. So I will have like the really dark chocolate, and I will kind of keep it as a treat till the evening. So I think I'm trying to, eat good quality chocolate in small amounts, rather than just, I think when I was younger, I was just eating all the chocolate. So I'm trying to do it in a healthy way. But it is, I don't know what would happen if I ran out of chocolate. So it's probably better not to go there.
Keep you well supplied, keep the mood happy. Okay. It's been an
Definitely.
absolute delight talking to you, Lorna, Julie,
Thank you so
and
much.
congratulations on your
Thank you.
publication, which I'm going to
Thank
download
you.
or buy a paperback even. You could sign it for me when I see you next.
Oh yeah, that would be brilliant. Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.